Masechet Baba Mesia Daf Ayin Aleph. The Mishnah that we're in the middle of studying said, Lovin mehen umavin notan b'ribit v'chen beger toshav. One is permitted to borrow and lend money to non-Jews with interest, and also a ger toshav, a resident alien, someone who accepted the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach, living in Israel, but has not fully converted to Judaism. One is allowed to lend and borrow them to them and from them with interest. And now, the Gemara on the previous daf quoted a statement of Rav Nachman, who said in the name of Rav Huna, Lo nisrecha ela dafilu rebit enochri. Now this statement we first applied to this pasuk, that one should not augment his riches with interest, and Rav Huna says that's true even if it is interest from a non-Jew. So we have a contradiction here. The Mishnah says one is permitted to collect interest from a non-Jew, and here Rav Huna says that one should not do so. On the previous stuff, we asked a question from the pasuk itself, and now we're going to continue asking from the Mishnah. Itibe lovin mehen umavino tam beribit v'chen beger toshav. How could Rav Nachman in the name of Rav Huna say that one should not collect interest from a non-Jew if the Mishnah says it's perfectly fine from a non-Jew and even a ger toshav? Amar Rav Chiya bered Rav Huna lo nisracha ela bechedei chayav. And so Rav Chiya said, the son of Rav Huna answered that when the Mishnah said it's permitted, that's talking about if the Jew is collecting interest sufficient for his livelihood. One can do so on a limited basis in order to collect a basic livelihood, just to buy food and basic needs. But to enrich oneself from interest from non-Jews, that is not permitted, and that's what Rav Huna was talking about when he said that one should not take from non-Jews. Ravina Amar, Hacha b'talmidei chachamim askin. Rav has another answer, and he says when it comes to Talmid Chacham, that Talmid Chacham is permitted, that's what the Mishnah is talking about, is permitted to take interest. But a non-Talmid Chacham, a regular layperson, should not, and that's what Rav Huna was talking about. Why? Ta'ama mai gizur Rabbanan, shema yilmod mima'asav, v'chevan de Talmid Chacham hu lo yilmod mima'asav. Why did the rabbis make a gezerah? That's referring to Rav Huna's statement that you should not do that. Of course, the Torah says it's permitted. The rabbis say don't do it because if a Jew takes interest from a non-Jew, he will learn from his ways, either maybe his general ways of idolatry, or more specifically, he will be accustomed to charging interest. And then, when he does business deals with Jews, he will also charge interest. And he's not going to be careful to make a distinction. However, a Talmid Chacham, since he's learned, he'll know, okay, this non-Jew, I'm allowed to do this. I won't learn from from these ways and take interest in all or any other idolatrous practices, and so since he will be careful not to learn from his ways, Talmid Chacham, the Gezerah does not apply to them, and they are allowed to take interest. This is an interesting example of a gezerah not applying to a certain group of people because the reason doesn't apply. Usually we say once you make a gezerah, even if the reason does not apply to a particular person or group, still you make it across the board. But here we make exceptions. Now that statement of Rav Huna that said you should not take interest even from a non-Jew, at first we applied it to the pasuk up here in from Mishle, and so that's what we just discussed. However, there are others who apply that same pasuk to a different context. The Taneh Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef taught the following baraita: Im kesef tavet ami et ani imach. Ami v'nochri, ami kodem. Ani v'ashir, ani kodem. Aniyecha v'aniyerecha, aniyecha kodmin. Aniyerecha v'aniyeracheret, aniyerecha kodmin. Rabraita teaches from a pasuk in Shemot. If and when you lend money to my nation, to the poor among you. So what are all these references? So it's giving a prioritization. If you have a choice to give, it's good to help all poor people if you have sufficient funds. But if there's insufficient funds and you have to decide who gets first, So if you have a choice between a Jewish poor and a non-Jewish poor, so Hashem says, my nation is first, so you should help out a Jewish poor person first. If you have a poor person and a rich person, a poor person takes precedence. In other words, a poor person that needs money and a rich person that needs to borrow money. They're richer compared to the poor person, but they have some need. So the very poor person should get a charity gift first. Your own poor, meaning a relative who's poor, and poor that are in your city, your own poor, you help out your relative. Helping a relative is also tzedakah. The poor of your city and the poor of a different city, even if they're all Jews, you have to help out the local poor first. Amar mor, ami v'nochri ami kodem, pishita. Now, let's analyze the beginning of that baraita. It says a Jewish poor person or a non-Jewish poor person, right? The Jewish poor person takes priority. Isn't that obvious? Why does the baraita even have to say that? Amar Rav Nachman, amar li huna, lo nisrechu afilu nochri beribit u'lisrael bechinam. Here is where Rav Nachman quoted Rav Huna. It wasn't about the pasuk regarding in Mishleh, but it was actually to answer this question. That we need this baraita to teach me that if I have a choice, I have some money, I can either lend it to a non-Jew and collect interest, which is good for me, I can make interest, or I can lend it to a Jew, but then I cannot charge interest. So you might think to say that, well, since I have, it's in my interest to collect interest, I can make money, so then I can do that. So therefore, the baraita says no. If there's no Jews that need a loan and you want to lend to non-Jew, fine. But if you have limited funds to lend out and you have a choice, so better to lend to a Jew without interest, and even forego the interest that you could be making by lending it to a non-Jew. Tanya, Amar Rabbi Yosef, Bod es samiyut anehem shel maveh b'debit. Now we're going to talk about how bad it is to collect interest. See how blind are people who lend money with interest. Adam koreh lechavero rasha, yored imo lechayav. It happens sometimes, unfortunately. People get into a fight, one person will call the other person wicked, and that person then will get insulted and in turn harass the guy who called him wicked, and they call each other names and harass each other. That's very unfortunate when that happens. No one would willingly put themselves into a situation where other people would call them terrible names. However, look at the person who charges interest. People who charge interest, they bring witnesses and a scribe and a pen, and they bring ink, and they write a contract, and they sign it. And the contractor says, here, I'm going to lend you money, and you have to pay me back 10% interest. By signing that, in effect, they are saying about themselves that this person denies the God of Israel because they blatantly go against the Torah's law. They're, in effect, saying, we don't care about God. We don't care about the Torah. They are calling themselves a Rasha and signing their names on the contract that says, I am a Rasha. Right? How blind do you have to be in order to do that? It's bad enough if you get into a fight with someone and they call you a Rasha and you call them a Rasha. It's a big problem. All right, you got to make peace. What could you do? No one would call themselves wicked, and yet these people willingly and knowingly make a public declaration in a contract written and signed, yes, I am a Rasha. So that you should not do that. Tanya, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Kol mi sheyesh lo ma'ot umalveh otam shelo b'ribit, alav hakatuv Omer, kaspo lo natan b'neshech, v'shochad al naki lo lakach, o se'ele lo yimot le'olam. And now on the positive side, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar teaches in a baraita that anyone who lends money without charging interest, the pasuk in Tehillim says, praises that person. He's given money without interest. He has not taken a bribe against the innocent, and that person will never collapse. He will never totter. So we can learn from this positive statement the opposite, negative. If someone does charge interest, then their finances will totter, will collapse. Hold on. We have empirical evidence that this is not always true. Sometimes people lose their money even though they don't charge interest. Now, the pasuk doesn't say that This is the only reason one will lose money. It could be there's other reasons one will lose money, but it does say that charging interest causes one to lose money. And so if that's the main reason, so why do people who don't charge interest, why do they lose their money sometimes? Amar Rabbi Elazar, halalu mitmotetin ve'olin, ve'halalu mitmotetin ve'enan olin. Rabbi Elazar explains there's still a difference. Those who don't charge interest, even though it could be that their finances will collapse, but they'll rise up again. Temporarily, things go down, the stock market goes down, it goes up, they'll be okay. But those people who charge interest, they will fall and they will not rise again. So it doesn't mean that nothing bad ever happens to someone who doesn't charge interest, but that they will be able to recover from it, unlike those who charge interest who won't. Lama tabit bogedim tacharish kebala rasha sadik mimenu. Pasuk from Habakkuk. They're asking Hashem, why do you observe the treacherous and you remain silent while the wicked swallows the one who is more righteous than he? Hashem, go help out this Sadiq. Now, the rabbis are wondering, what does it mean, Sadiq Mimenu, who's more righteous? Just say, Kebala Rasha Sadiq. Hashem, why are you standing by and not doing anything when the wicked swallow the righteous? Amar Ravuna, Sadiq Mimenu, Boleya. Sadiq Amor, Eno Boleya. And the answer is, Rasha only has the power to swallow someone who is relatively more righteous than he is, but not very righteous. So that person, yes, he will swallow, at least for some time, but hopefully he'll get back on his feet. However, if someone is completely righteous, objectively righteous, not just relatively righteous compared to the Rasha, if someone's completely righteous, then the Rasha will have no power over him and will not be swallowed at all. Tanya, Rabbi Omer, Ger Sedek ha'amur le'inyan mechira, ve'ger toshav ha'amur le'inyan rebit, eni yodea mahu. Okay, now Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says, the Pisukim in Vayikra regarding selling of a Hebrew slave, they mention Ger Sedek, that a Hebrew slave can be sold to a Ger Sedek. Rabbi says, I don't understand that pasuk. We're going to explain what he means. And also, the word Ger Toshav appears in the pasuk regarding Ribit. And here again he says, I don't understand why the pasuk is mentioning Ger Toshav. Okay, we're going to take each in turn, explain the question first, and then we will provide an answer. Ger Sedek ha'amor le'inyan mechira dichtiv, v'chi amuch achicha imach, v'nimkar lach, v'lo lecha ela legesh ne'emad leger. Okay, so the Pisukim, let's look at the Pisukim inside first. And it says here in Pasuk 47, V'chi tasig biad ger v'toshav imach, umach achicha imo. If you have a sojourner stranger that is rich, so someone came to live in Israel, and they didn't convert, but it's a stranger, and they got rich. Meanwhile, your brother, meaning a full Jew, became poor, and v'nimkar leger toshav imach or la'aker mishpachat ger. And should the Hebrew, the Jew, be sold to a ger toshav with you, or we're going to explain what this means also, the offspring of a stranger's family. Okay, so we see here that this could happen, and then it talks about redemption. So let's see. So it could happen that someone will be sold, and not only to you, but even to a ger. Velo leger sedek ela leger toshav. First, we're going to explain everything in the pasuk, then we'll explain the question. Eshene'emar leger toshav. Not only can a Jew be sold to a ger toshav, to a ger sedek, that's the first ger, but even to a ger toshav, as it says, ger toshav, mishpachat ger ze anochri, and it's possible. It gets worse and worse. So it's bad enough to be a slave to a Jew, worse to a convert, worse to a ger toshav, worse to a foreigner, a nochri, someone who is not even doesn't even live in the land of Israel. Maybe they're just passing through. You have to sell it be sold to a foreign land. That's even worse. An eker, an offshoot of a nochri, that's someone who's sold into idol worship itself. That's to be sold into a temple of idol worship. You have to go and work as be a slave in the temple. That would be the worst position for an Eved Ivri to have to be sold. So it's getting worse and worse. Okay, so now we understand that pasuk. Let's go back and analyze this one part of the Braita. Amar mor velo lecha ela leger shnemar leger lememra deger kaneh Eved Ivri. So you said not only will an Eved Ivri be sold to a Jew, they may even be sold to a ger, meaning a ger sedek. So are we to learn from this Braita that a ger sedek can acquire an Eved Ivri? That's what it seems. But here's the problem. Urminhi en ager nikneh be'Eved Ivri ve'en isha ve'ger konin Eved Ivri. We have a Braita that says that a convert cannot be acquired as an Eved Ivri. In other words, a ger, right, a convert who, let's say, steals and can't pay back or whatever. Normally, if he was a born Jew, he would be sold as an Eved Ivri. But a convert does not get sold as an Eved Ivri. And the one that's relevant here is that a woman and a convert do not acquire an Eved Ivri. And so, how could the pasuk say, "Oh, if a Jew becomes poor and he gets sold to a ger sedek"? So if he gets poor, he gets sold to an ger sedek. But this Braita says that a ger sedek cannot acquire an Eved Ivri. Now, first we're going to explain the Braita, then we'll answer the question. Ger lo nikne Eved Ivri v'shabed mishpachto ba'inen b'haleka. How come a convert cannot be sold as a Hebrew slave? Because the pasuk says that after he's done with his service, he goes back to his family. Now, what do you mean back to his family? He doesn't have a family, right? Someone who converts he becomes like his biological family is no longer his legal family. And so he doesn't have a family to go back to, and therefore, this is actually quite a kindness that we treat a ger better than a born Jew, that a ger can never be sold as an Eved Ivri. That explains the first half of this Baraita. Ven isha veger konin Eved Ivri, isha lav orach ar'a, ger name gemiri demikne kaneh, tela makne la kaneh. A woman cannot acquire an Eved Ivri because it's not proper conduct. You're going to have a woman who owns a Hebrew slave. Sometimes you have a male slave with a woman owner. This could lead to promiscuity, and so that is not allowed. The convert? Well, we compare them. Anyone who can acquire a Hebrew slave can be acquired as a Hebrew slave, but the ger who cannot be acquired, as we said over here, also cannot acquire. So that explains the reasoning of the Braita, and this leads to the question. In the pasuk, it says ger, that a Jew can be sold, if he gets poor, he can be sold as a Hebrew slave to a ger sedek. And this Baraita says that a ger sedek cannot own an Eved Ivri. That was Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's question. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, eno koneh v'dino k'Yisrael, aval koneh v'dino kanochri. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak explains, when a ger sedek owns an Eved Ivri, he can own it. It's an Eved Ivri. However, he will own it according to the same laws as if a non-Jew owns a Hebrew slave, not in the same way that a Jew owns a Hebrew slave. And we're going to see the difference. The Tanya. Hanisava nimkala nochri eno obed, lo et haben velo et habat. If an Eved Ivri who has his ear pierced, so that he can work past 6 years, up to the Yovel, that case, or an Eved Ivri who sold to a non-Jew. Talking about, right, and not a get at all, a total non-Jew. If that non-Jew dies, then the Eved Ivri is not passed on to the son or daughter of that non-Jew. Only if it's an Eved Ivri working for a born Jew, and it's within 6 years, and the owner dies, let's say after the 3rd year, then the Eved Ivri goes to the heirs of the Jew. However, that would not be true if it was a nirsa. Not so. If he's past 6 years, then he does not get passed on to the Jew's offspring, heirs. And also, if a Jew is sold to a non-Jew, he only works that non-Jew, but not the heirs of the non-Jew. And so that's the same. The same is true for a ger sedek. If an eved ivri works for a ger sedek and that ger sedek owner dies, even within the first 6 years, he is not transferred to the heirs of that ger sedek. That's what it means. So that's how we resolve it. The pasuk that says it will, a Jew can be owned by a ger sedek. That's true. Can be owned by a ger sedek. This baraita that says cannot means it cannot be owned under the same laws as a Jew owns a Hebrew slave, but rather he can own the eved ivri according to the same laws that a non-Jew owns a Hebrew slave. Amar Mor. Before we get to the Rabbi Yehuda and I see a second question, we just want to analyze that baraita. When the baraita says that a woman and a ger sedek cannot acquire an Eved Ivri, this seems to contradict the opinion of Rabban Shimon Gamliel. He can't be the author of that baraita. The Tanya, Isha konata shefachot ve'na konata avadim. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer af konata avadim. The Tanakama of this baraita says that a woman can acquire a maidservant, but cannot acquire a male slave. But Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel disagrees and says a woman can acquire a male servant also, Eved Ivri. So you see that he says it's allowed. This goes against the Braita that says not. No, we can say that Braita is also according to Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, and there's no problem. That the first Braita was talking about an Eved Ivri. She's not allowed to acquire an Eved Ivri, but an Eved Kanaani she is allowed to acquire. Why? What's the difference? Well, Eved Ivri siniyat la, Eved Kanaani paris la. A Hebrew slave is sanuam, is discreet, meaning she thinks or knows that if she sins and has relations with the Hebrew slave, he will be discreet, he won't tell anyone, and she'll be able to get away with it, and so she's more likely to sin with him. Therefore, a woman is not allowed to acquire an Eved Ivri. However, an Eved Kanaani is not going to be discreet. If she sleeps with her Eved Kanaani, he's going to go tell people, and she'll be embarrassed. And so she's not going to sleep with him in the first place, and therefore she is allowed to acquire an Eved Kanaani. Elaha detane Rav Yosef armalta la tarbe kalba vela tashri bar be Rav beushpiza. Now we challenge that reasoning that we just mentioned from a baraita that Rav Yosef teaches. He teaches that a widow may not raise a dog. We're afraid, since she's a widow, she has no husband, it could be she may come to sin with the dog. And furthermore, she is not allowed, a student is not allowed to be a lodger in the home of a widow. Also, we're worried that it might lead to mixed dancing. Bishlama bar berav siniya'la. So we understand the student is going to be discreet. If they sin, the student's not going to say anything. He's embarrassed. And so she'll think she can get away with it. So therefore, we have to make sure that she cannot be, a single woman cannot have a single student as a lodger. Ela kalba kevan de misrich ba mirteta. However, a dog, if she sins with the dog, then it's going to follow her around, and then everybody will see, why is the dog following her around? And they're going to conclude, she must have sinned with it. So she'll be embarrassed, and therefore she won't do it, and so it should be permitted. Amri kevan de chishadya le umsa misrich batra. Amri inashe mishum umsa de shadya le hu de misrich. And we answer, no, that's not the only reason why the dog would follow her around. It would also follow around if she throws it a piece of meat. That's it. The dog says, this is my owner. Look, she gave me meat. And so people will see the dog following her around, and people will assume that it's because she fed the dog some meat. They're not going to assume the worst case, and therefore therefore she'll think that she can get away with it, and therefore it's not permitted for a woman to a widow to own a dog or have a single student. And so now we explained that according to the same logic that we just mentioned works. Ger toshav amur linyan ribit maihi. Now we get to the Yehuda Nasi's second question regarding ger toshav and ribit. What's the question? Dichtib v'chi amuch achicha u'mata yado imach v'chezakta bo ger v'toshav v'chai imach. אל תיקח מאיתו נשך ותרבית ויראת מאלוהיך וכאחיך עמך. If your brother should become poor and his means fail with you, then you should help him up so that he will live with you. And do not take from him interest, and fear God. Now it says to help him out, it says ger v'toshav v'chai imach. So according to this, ger, toshav, doesn't that mean, well, the word ger maybe is a ger sedek, toshav, wouldn't that mean a ger toshav? And that would mean that one is not permitted to take interest from a ger toshav. So how can we square that with our Mishnah? Our Mishnah says you're allowed to take interest from a non-Jew and also a ger toshav. That's Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's second question. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, mi ketib al tikach meitam, meito ketib meIsrael. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, look at the pasuk. It doesn't say don't take from them, right? See the continuation. Give Shabichai imach al tikach. It should have said meitam if it was referring to multiple categories, but it only refers to one category, singular, and therefore, who is it referring to? Only from an Israelite, and it's not referring to a ger toshav. Now, we still have to explain the word toshav according to this, because if the word ito refers just to taking interest from a Jew, then what is the word toshav doing in this pasuk? So you have to answer something like that to help a poor person, that applies also to a ger toshav. But the charging interest, that is only charging interest to from a Jew, but one can charge interest from a ger toshav. Tenor Rabbanan, Al tikach meito nesher v'tarbit, aval ata naaseh lo arev. This Braita says one cannot take from him interest, so it means that you just can't collect interest, but you are permitted to be a guarantor on the loan. Now, who's him? Arev leman, ilem arev Israel v'ha'tana elu obrin belo ta'aseh, ha'malveh v'haloveh ha'arev ha'edim. If you're talking about a Jew who is borrowing money from a Jew and you're going to be the guarantor, well, but then we have a Mishnah later on that says the following people violate the law: the lender and the borrower and the guarantor and the witnesses. So obviously you can't be a guarantor for a loan between two Jews. Ela lenochri v'chevan didineh denochri dazil batar arba nihu dekash shakil mineh ribita. Rather, it's talking about a Jew who owes money, who is borrowing money from a non-Jew and paying the non-Jew interest. It's a loan for $100, and he says, okay, you're going to have to pay back $110. Now, the non-Jewish law says that the lender does not have to go to the borrower first, and then only if the borrower defaults, then he goes to the guarantor. Under non-Jewish law, the lender may go directly to the guarantor. So now in this case, the lender, the non-Jew, when the time is up, he's going to go to the guarantor and say, listen, you have to pay me $110. Fine, the guarantor will pay him $110. That part is okay, because that's going to the non-Jew. But now that creates a new loan, in effect, that the Jew borrower is going to have to pay the guarantor $110, which is the $100 plus the $10 interest. And thereby, the Jew will be collecting interest from the other Jew. And so, this Baraita cannot be talking about being a guarantor for a Jew, for a loan between a Jew and a non-Jew either. So you can't be a guarantor for a loan between two Jews, and you also cannot be a guarantor for a Jew who's borrowing from a non-Jew. So what does this Braita mean when it says you can be a guarantor? And the answer is, Amar Rav Sheshet, shekibel alav ladun bedinei Israel. We're talking about a case where it is a Jew borrowing from a non-Jew, but where the non-Jew agreed to be judged according to to Jewish law. He's submitting himself to Jewish law, and under Jewish law, the lender first collects from the borrower, and therefore he'll go to the borrower, and the borrower will pay $110, and therefore the guarantor will be out of it and won't have to be caught up in charging interest to the other Jew. Hold on. If the Gentile agreed to be judged according to Jewish law, well, according to Jewish law, you're not allowed to charge interest, so then he wouldn't be allowed to charge interest at all. Rav Sheshet explains, we're talking about a case when the non-Jew accepted Jewish law with regard to collecting the loan from the borrower first and only then going to the guarantor, but he did not accept it with regard to the prohibition against charging interest. So he only accepted this aspect. So if it's a case like that, then a Jew is allowed to be a guarantor for a fellow Jew who is borrowing money with interest from a non-Jew. The next part of the Mishnah teaches Malvei Yisrael me'otav shenochri midat hanochri vechule. We're going to see a braita that repeats exactly the words of the Mishnah, but then explains them. Tenor banan. Malvei Yisrael me'otav shenochri midat hanochri aval lo midat Yisrael. Kesad, a Jew can lend out the money of a non-Jew, in other words, be a middleman, with the knowledge of the non-Jew, but not with the knowledge of the Jew. The language is not very clear. So what does this mean? Yisrael shelava ma'ot min hanochri biribit. So a Jew borrowed money from a non-Jew with interest. He borrowed $100. He's going to have to pay the non-Jew back $110. That's fine. So now he's ready to return the loan. He's done. He used it for a month, and he's going to return the money now. So another Jew, his friend, found this Jew borrower and said, hold on, what, you're going to return that money? Listen, I could really use that money. So, tenem li v'ani a'ale lecha keder shata ma'ale lo asur. He tells the other Jew, hey, give it to me and I will pay you whatever you would have paid him. So this is prohibited because basically the Jew, original borrower, is now lending $100 to the other Jew and getting back $110. That would be lending with interest. However, if, however, the Jew who was the borrower presented the deal to the non-Jew and said, listen, I'm ready to pay back your loan. However, my friend here would like me to extend the loan to him on your behalf. So if the non-Jew knows about it and agrees to it, basically in this case, the non-Jew is making the Jew as a middleman, as a kind of an agent for him, and saying, okay, I allow you to take my money that you already have in your hands and give it to that Jew. I gave you $100, give him the $100, and then you can be my middleman, my shaliach, to collect from him 110, and then you will give the 110 back to me. So as long as the non-Jew is authorizing it, then the Jew is only acting as a middleman for the non-Jew. Then it's permitted. However, if the non-Jew doesn't know about it, well then, that's like the Jew just making that a new loan to this fellow Jew with interest, and it's prohibited. Now the Braita continues for the other way around. A non-Jew borrows money from a Jew with interest. So the Jew is the lender, lent the non-Jew $100, and he's going to have to pay back $110. And so he's done. He's about to return the money to the Jewish lender. But then a second Jew sees that and says, hold on. He finds the non-Jew and says, hey, why don't you just lend it to me? Don't give it back. Lend it to me, give me the $100, and I'll pay you back $110, and then you can return that to the Jew. That's permitted because we see this as a separate transaction. The Jew, the non-Jew borrowed money, he's going to pay back $110. That's fine because a Jew can collect interest from a non-Jew, and then separately, without knowledge of the original Jew, this non-Jew is also lending out $100 and getting back $110. So therefore, that's permitted. However, if they go to the original Jew and they say, hey, are you okay with me being your agent? And I will be the middleman, and I'm going to take your money, Jew, and I'll lend it and I'll transfer it to this other Jew, the non-Jewish middleman says, and then I will collect the payment at the end with the interest on your behalf and transfer it to you. In that case, that's prohibited because that's a Jew lending on interest to another Jew, and the non-Jew is only the middleman. All right, now we'll analyze the Braita. Bishlama sefa lechumra ela resha kevan de'en shlichut lenochri ihuniu daka shakil mine ribita. I understand the sefa, this line here, that we're going to be machmir. The issue we're going to deal with now is whether a non-Jew can be an agent and can appoint a Jew as an agent for himself. Right? A Jew can appoint another adult Jew as an agent, and then the agent acts on their behalf. But does agency work for a non-Jew? I'm going to say generally not so. The sefa, where you have the Jew is the original lender and the Jew is also the final borrower, and the non-Jew is the guy in the middle. So if he is not an agent, well, then that would be okay, because then he's taking a loan, and as a separate act, he's also giving a loan. But just in case the non-Jew is an agent for the lender, and in that case, if he's an agent, he's facilitating a loan directly between a Jew and another Jew with interest. So then that would be a problem. Okay, so we're going to be machmir just in case. Fine. But in the Resha, since a non-Jew cannot appoint a Jew as an agent, so then that's the Jew that's taking the interest directly from the Jew. Remember, that case is where the non-Jew is the original lender. He gave money to a Jew who lends it out further to another Jew. Now, in that case, even if you would go, certainly, if he just does it without the knowledge of the non-Jew is prohibited, because that's just a separate loan that the two Jews are making with interest. But here it says, but if they tell the original Jew, a non-Jew about it, then it's okay, because the non-Jew is basically appointing the Jew, who the first borrower, as his agent. This is you, give him the money, and then give me back the payment with the interest, and so therefore that's permitted. But that assumes that the original non-Jew has the power to appoint a Jew as an agent. But we know the halacha is that he cannot do so. So therefore, if he's not an agent, he's not doing it on behalf of the non-Jew, then he's giving the loan himself, and that should be prohibited. Amar Rav Huna bar Manoch mishemeh de Rav Acha bered Rav Ika hacha b'maskinan kegon damar le hanichem al gabe karka v'hipater. So Rav Huna, the son of Manoch, in the name of Rav Acha, the son of Rav Ika, explains that we're talking about a case where the non-Jew told the first Jewish borrower, listen, take the money, just leave it on that rock over there, on the floor over there, and then you're done, right? You've finished your obligation, and then the other Jew will come and pick it up. So the scenario is, the non-Jew lent $100 to the Jew, and now the second Jew says, oh, okay, give it to me. So they go back to the non-Jew. The non-Jew says, yeah, I don't mind lending it out again. So, but don't give it to him directly. You just, put it on the floor, and you're dismissed, right? You paid back what you need to pay back, and the other guy will take the money. Maybe he only has to put $100 because the other guy is going to assume the continuity of the loan and eventually pay back $110. So that's fine, because the first guy put his money down, and he's out of the picture, and so he doesn't have to be an agent. He's actually the opposite. He's totally out of the picture. He's not an agent. He's not anything. So then that's permitted. We ask about that yachi my lememra. If so, then what's the chidush? Obviously, right? If the first Jew paid it back or put it down, same thing. Let's say he paid it back, put it in his hands. He's done. He's out of the picture. So when he puts it down, it's true. Here he's putting it down so that the other guy will pick it up. But the non-Jew said, you put it down, I want it there, and you're done, you're dismissed. So there's no chidush here. Ela amar papa, kegon shenatal v'natan beyad. We're talking about a case where the non-Jew took the money back from the first Jew and gave it to the second Jew. Well, we still ask, then that's also obvious. This is a new loan. So why would you even think it could be a problem for the first Jew. Mahudatema nochri gufe ki abid adatad Israel ka gamir ve'ahib kamashmalan. Because I might have thought that when the non-Jew is doing this and taking the money back and giving it, he's doing it on behalf of the first borrower. In other words, the non-Jew says, listen, I gave you $100 and for you to pay me back. Oh, you want to give it to him? I'll be your agent, right? I'll trust you and you based on your recommendation. So give me the money and I'll be your agent to give it to that other person. So I might have thought that maybe that's a problem. It might actually be worse than putting it out down on the ground and dismissed. Then you're dismissed, you're out of it. But if he's taking it back, maybe he's still considering the first, just kind of like the lender gave it to the first Jew. The first Jew hands it to the lender hands it to the second guy. It's in one long chain. So I might have thought that was a problem, and therefore the Baraita teaches us that there is no problem here. Rav Asher Amar ki amrin hanen shelichut lanochri hanemi lebetruma aval bechol haTorah kula yesh shelichut lanochri. Rav Asher says, I have another answer. Actually, a non-Jew can be an agent. When do we say that a non-Jew cannot be an agent? That's only for terumah. If a Jew owns terumah, he cannot tell a non-Jew, go and separate terumah for me. That for sure he can't do. But that's localized to that law where it's a problem because of a derasha that we're going to see. But in other matters of Torah law, then you can make an agent. And so that's why it's permitted. The non-Jew gave the first Jew a loan. And now the first Jew goes back and says, listen, my friend wants to borrow this money now. Right? Is that okay? And the non-Jew says, yes, it's okay. You can be the agent for me and give it over. So there is agency. And that's why it's permitted. Rav Asher is going with a straightforward reading of the Baraita. We ask, V'had Rav Asher barutahi. No, this statement of Rav Asher is outside. Bar, kick it out. It is not authentic. It is not correct. Maishana tiruma dela tichtib atem gam atem ma atem bnei berit af sheluchachem name bnei berit. Why do you think that tiruma is different from everywhere else, and then tiruma one cannot be non-Jew cannot be an agent? Because the pasuk says atem. Let's look at that pasuk inside. Ken tarimu gam atem tirumat Adonai mikom asrotechem shemevet bnei Yisrael untatem imenu et tirumat Adonai laharon hakohen. So what does it mean? What's this extra word gam? Ken tarimu, just say atem. Why do you have to say that gam atem are going to take teruma? So the Darasha says atem gam atem. Just like atem refers to bnei berit, meaning Jews, so too any agent that you designate to take teruma for you must also be a Jew. And this is the source, and it's a paradigm for the rest of the Torah. Then all matters of the Torah, also only a Jew can be an agent and not a non-Jew. So we see that Rav Asher is not correct. That Rav Asher barutahi. You cannot say that a non-Jew can be an agent in other matters. That's not a good answer. Ikadamre amar Rav Asher ki amrin anen shidchut anochri hanemila inhu ledidan aval anan leditu have havina lehu shaliach. There's another version of Rav Asher, and according to this version, he says when we say that a non-Jew cannot be an agent, that is referring to the non-Jew being an agent for a Jew. A Jew cannot appoint a non-Jew to take teruma or to do anything, any other halachic enactment. However, for us to them, they can be a shaliach. A non-Jew can appoint a Jew, and that would resolve our baraita, because the non-Jew lender is appointing a Jew to be the middleman to lend out his money, and so the baraita therefore makes sense. However, this also we reject. This is also outside. Dela dichtib atem gam atem l'rabot sheluchachem ma atem bnei berit af sheluchachem bnei berit. From where do we learn that teruma is different in that a non-Jew cannot be an agent for a Jew? Because it says atem and gam atem, that includes your messengers. And just like you are Jewish, your messenger has to be Jewish. That means a Jew has to appoint another Jew. A Jew cannot appoint a non-Jew to be a messenger to effectuate something halachically, legally. So we can use that as a paradigm and learn it also the other way around, that a non-Jew also cannot appoint a Jew to be an agent, and therefore we have to reject Rav Asher's statement as an error. Ravina Amar, Ravina, however, has another answer. It's true, on the Deoraita level, a non-Jew cannot be an agent or appoint a Jew as an agent. However, on the Derabanan level, the rabbis can say that there is shilichut, and the non-Jew can acquire something for a Jew. Same thing as a minor. Just even though a minor cannot be an agent, nevertheless, someone says a minor, go and do this, and they acquire something. The minor can acquire something on the Derabanan level. The rabbis made this so that, let's say a minor finds something on the floor and wants to keep it, and someone says, "Oh, you're a minor, you have no right to take something," and just grabs it out of their hand. So then it's going to cause fighting. So the rabbis say, yes, just like a kid can acquire something, and therefore you can ask a kid to acquire something on your behalf, and it will work midrabanan. Hachiname lashena. So here also, a Jew can perform an act. A Jew can ask a non-Jew to do something, and it work midrabanan. And the other way around, the non-Jew is going to ask the Jew to be the middleman midrabanan, in order to give this money to the non-Jew, to the other Jew, and that is sufficient, even though it's only on the Rabbanan level. That's sufficient to make that middleman Jew only an agent, since he did it as an agent of the non-Jew. So then that's permitted. He's not taking the interest himself, he's only passing it along. That was Ravina's answer. However, we reject this too. Velahi Yisrael te lichlal shelichut nochri laate lichlal shelichut. It's different. A Jew, even if they're a minor, eventually they will be an adult and will be eligible to be an agent. However, a non-Jew, no matter how long you wait, will never be eligible to be an agent mideoraita. And therefore, it makes sense that the rabbis would only say that a katan, who potentially will become an agent one day, can be an agent even midrabanan, even when they're young, but not so for a non-Jew, and therefore that will not work as an answer to explain our baraita. Baruch Adonai leolam. Amen ve'amen.